I am a nefarious woman, a villainess whose deeds are beyond reproach, and my husband harbors a deep-seated hatred for me. Yet, after my demise, he sat by my coffin throughout the night, his eyes reddened with sorrow, murmuring incessantly in the next life, "Strive to be a good person. Do not remain so." Wicked. I find it utterly ludicrous. How could a villainess possibly transform into a paragon of virtue in another life? Upon my rebirth, my methods surpassed those of my previous existence, proving even more formidable. Yet, at this juncture, why does my once noble and virtuous husband now express regret? 1. The esteemed and talented Li Qiuying, renowned as the foremost young lady of the capital, has long been my intimate companion. Yet of late, I have found myself evading her presence. My maid, Xiao Hong, appeared perplexed. "Miss, why do you feign illness and avoid Miss Li, who has been visiting frequently?" I perused the accounts, lifting my teacup for a delicate sip. "She brings misfortune. There is little merit in seeing her. But are you not close friends?" I cast my gaze upon the ledger, recalling how my father had discreetly supplemented the accounts of the Li family with funds from the Song estate over the years. And I could not help but chuckle. Indeed, we are as close as sisters. Li Qiuying's mother, Wang Qinglian, was my mother's cousin, who often visited the Song household before her marriage. Consequently, she and my father engaged in a dalliance. Before my father achieved scholarly success, the Song family had already fallen on hard times, yet they could not bear to part with the dowry my mother brought, so my grandmother concealed this affair. Wang Qinglian was subsequently married off to one of my father's subordinates, already pregnant with Li Qiuying at the time of her wedding. They might have concealed this secret from my mother for a lifetime, but fate intervened. While assisting her mother in childbirth, Wang Qinglian whispered to her, inquiring whether my eyes bore a striking resemblance to Li Qiuying's. My mother, taken unawares, could scarcely fathom the ignoble acts committed by her husband and sister before her very eyes. I was but 8 years old then, standing outside the layers of gauze curtains. I witnessed Wang Qinglian lean towards my mother's ear, prompting my mother to cast a glance in my direction before she coughed up blood. That day, she suffered a tragic childbirth, resulting in both a mother and child lost. Wang Qinglian later claimed she urged my mother to persevere for my sake. At that time, I naively believed her words. It was only years later that I uncovered the truth of Li Qiuying's heritage. I interrogated the midwife who had assisted my mother in giving birth and learned the grim reality. Alas, by then, Wang Qinglian had already passed away. However, I was fortunate enough to have been reborn. In my previous life, I endured 20 years in the courtyard, witnessing all manner of schemes and machinations. For me, revenge poses no insurmountable challenge. 2. I feigned illness to avoid Li Qiuying on several occasions. On this particular day, she came to visit me, accompanied by Wang Qinglian. Under the guise of being my aunt, Wang Qinglian frequently came to see me. Her needlework was exquisite, and she had taught me the art of embroidery. Having lost my mother at a tender age, I found solace in her presence. As her visits increased, so too did her clandestine meetings with my father. I once believed that my father had not taken a legitimate wife out of lingering affection for my mother, but it became evident that he had other entanglements. When Li Ren first entered officialdom, his monthly salary was but a meager sum, yet Wang Qinglian and Li Qiuying had lived in opulence all these years, indulging in a life of luxury, sustained by my father's financial support. My gaze lingered on the intricately adorned golden hairpin in Wang Qinglian's hair before I coughed lightly into my handkerchief, signaling Xiao Hong to serve tea. Li Qiuying took a sip from the teacup and set it down, frowning. "This tea is old and stale." I smiled at her remark. "Your palate is indeed discerning. I cannot detect the difference." This tea was sent by my grandmother, who mentioned that the estate has been incurring substantial expenses lately, necessitating frugality in the various courtyards. Thus my supply is somewhat lacking. Wang Qinglian also set her teacup down, attempting to smooth over the situation. "Your mother hailed from the wealthiest family in Jiangnan. How could you possibly be in want?" At that moment, she noticed the unfinished embroidery I had left on the table and picked it up. "These stitches are not executed well. Allow me to assist you." I nodded in agreement and turned to Li Qiuying to discuss the rare teas recently imported into the capital. Sunlight streamed in, the fragrance of tea wafting through the air, and the courtyard exuded an atmosphere of tranquil beauty. Observing the mother-daughter duo before me, I suddenly chuckled. In truth, I possess some excellent tea as well, but I have infused the tea you're drinking today with a touch of poison, fearing it would spoil the fine leaves. Hence, I served you this instead. The room fell silent, the sound of a needle dropping audible. Li Qiuying's expression froze in shock. "What did you say?" Drip, drip. A few drops of crimson blood fell onto the pure white silk cloth stretched over the bamboo frame, slowly soaking through. Li Qiuying turned her head slowly to glance at Wang Qinglian, from whose mouth and nose blood flowed incessantly.
Y regarda Li Qiuying kuuli, remarking.
She consumed more of the poison tea than you, hence her affliction manifests more swiftly. Li Qiuying clutched her chest, collapsing onto the floor, her eyes wide with disbelief.
You
have lost your mind. Why would you harm us? I gazed at Wang Qinglian with a smile. You would do better to inquire of your mother why she sought to harm mine. The maidservants, witnessing their mistress collapse and bleed, hurried to summon my father. As he entered, he was met with the sight of me pressing a dagger against Wang Qinglian's neck, coldly demanding, "Speak. Why did you seek to harm my mother?" Wang Qinglian could not muster a response, only continuing to bleed profusely. My father, horrified by the scene, trembled. I turned to him slowly. Are you afraid, father? The blood that flowed the night my mother perished in childbirth far exceeded this. He pointed a trembling finger at me. Song Jinyu, have you lost your senses? Put down the knife at once. I lowered my hand with a sigh. She is beyond speech now, and nothing more can be extracted from her. Yet I have other means. I straightened my posture and approached my father, gripping the hand he extended towards me. In an instant, the blade sliced a long gash across his palm. In that moment, I resembled a demon risen from the depths of hell, causing the servants trailing behind my father to recoil in fear. Though I could not match the strength of a grown man, his terror allowed me to easily drag him before Li Qiuying. Blood trickled down his palm, mingling with the pool of blood that Li Qiuying had expelled. Tears of laughter streamed down my face. Our blood now mingles, revealing that she is, indeed, your daughter as well. I released my father's hand and knelt before Wang Qinglian, inquiring, what you whispered to my mother during her labor was this very truth, was it not? It must have pained you greatly. If you acknowledge it, I shall grant you a swift end. My father, rising from the ground, began to curse incoherently behind me. You ungrateful daughter. How dare you stab your own father? Before he could finish, blood splattered across his face. The dagger in my hand plunged into Wang Qinglian's neck. The gushing blood flowed down the veins of my palm. She stared at me with wide eyes, unable to utter a single word. In my past life, my greatest regret had been failing to avenge my mother. In this life, I finally fulfilled that which I had long sought. 3. Li Qiuying's father, Li Sheng, has recently ascended the ranks, gaining favor with the Prince of Heng and rising through the ranks of government. His current standing in the officialdom is now on par with my father's. Naturally, my father dares not offend him. I wiped the blood from the dagger, softly reminding my father, in 2 hours, night will fall, and Li Run will send someone to search for his wife and daughter. Fear not, they entered the Song estate unseen. Yet 2 lavishly dressed women were indeed spotted ascending the mountain to pray and offer incense. My father, trembling, rose from the floor to gaze at me. His eyes filled with dread. He would have gladly ended my life, yet could only curse me while assisting me in cleaning up the aftermath. On their way to the mountain to pray, the Li mother and daughter encountered bandits. In an attempt to protect Li Qiuying, Lady Li sustained multiple stab wounds and succumbed to her injuries. Li Qiuying narrowly escaped with her life. As Li Qiuying was carried out of my courtyard, her eyes were filled with blood, glaring at me with malice. Song Jinyu, I will make you pay for my mother's death. I found her threat somewhat amusing. Should you ever dare to appear within my sight again, I shall expose your true lineage. Do you believe you can survive long enough to avenge your mother? Until the latter half of the night, my father finally returned, his robe stained with dust and blood. As he stormed into the courtyard to confront me, I had just finished transcribing the accounts. He glanced at the white silk beside my hand, his eyes reddening as he questioned me. How can you still have the audacity to live after committing such a heinous act? I set down my pen and lifted my gaze to meet his. Wang Qinglian caused my mother's death. She deserves to die. Why should I pay the price for a murderer? He sneered coldly. This courtyard is already besieged. Without that white silk, you will not see the dawn. I presented the transcribed accounts before him. These are the false accounts you have concocted over the years to support Wang Qinglian and her daughter. You wish to kill me to conceal your disgraceful deeds, but is there truly any wall that does not let the wind through? If I were to die, this account, along with your illicit affair with Wang Qinglian and the letter that drove my mother to her demise, would reach the hands of the censors in the court. At that time, can you preserve your official career, the future and reputation of the Song family, or even your own life? He stared at the accounts. His eyes dimmed with despair. You have long since plotted this, he remarked. I smiled lightly, though I was the one who killed Wang Qinglian. It is you who aided me in the aftermath. Now we are like two grasshoppers bound together on the same string. My father looked at me with a gaze that was both unfamiliar and fearful. You were always so kind-hearted. How did you suddenly become so malevolent?
Why?
I couldn't possibly tell him that I had been reborn, could I? Before leaving, he pointed at me and cursed, "Vile woman, you are nothing but a viper." It had been so long since I had heard that term. In my previous life, when Shen Rongqing had gripped my throat, he had hurled the same insult at me. In my past life, Shen Rongqing had fallen head over heels for Li Qiuying. However, the Shen family had been prominent for generations, and as the eldest son with great expectations placed upon him, the matriarch, Princess Yongning, would never look favorably upon a family that climbed the social ladder through flattery. Instead, she favored me, the plain and modest girl brought in by Li Qiuying as a mere embellishment, and arranged a marriage proposal. After marrying into the Shen family, I experienced a brief period of affection with Shen Rongqing. His career flourished, and with the Shen family's support, he ascended to the position of prime minister within a decade of service. Years passed, yet within the prestigious Shen household, no new offspring graced the halls. I became the object of envy among the women of the capital. When questioned, he merely replied with a gentle smile, "My wife forbids it." After saying this, he shed his cloak and tenderly draped it over my shoulders. Upon returning to the courtyard, his warmth gradually faded. Grabbing my hair, he forcefully pushed my head into the bathwater, the sharp pain on my scalp compelling me to raise my head and meet his furious gaze. Shen Rongqing smiled as he inquired, "Song Jinyu, is your position as the matriarch of the Shen family still comfortable?" I sputtered water and asked, "Why don't you just divorce me?" He remained silent, staring at me for a long while before sneering. "How amusing. How could I ever let you go? Unless you die." Indeed, only in death would my knowledge of Shen Rongqing's secrets be concealed. After the Li family was disgraced, Shen Rongqing knelt before the ancestral hall for an entire night, solely to bring Li Qiuying into his household and protect her for a lifetime. It was then that I realized she was truly the one he cherished. That night, after taking the medicine meant to sustain my pregnancy, I bled profusely. I remained unconscious for 3 whole days, during which Shen Rongqing did not visit me once, as Li Qiuying was humiliated by those sent by my mother-in-law, causing her great distress. A group of servants outside the courtyard he had prepared for Li Qiuying exposed her status as the daughter of a traitor. She was meant to serve as a courtesan but shamelessly crawled into bed to become a concubine, now daring to seek entry into the family. The women who caught her in the act restrained her, delivering several stinging slaps. When Shen Rongqing finally came to see me after tending to Li Qiuying, I complained. "My father and I went to great lengths to secure her release from exile, and now she has committed such a disgraceful act. I should never have saved her. It has only brought suffering to the lady of the house." Shen Rongqing looked taken aback. "Why would you say such things when you and she are like sisters?" "You must be mistaken, my husband. I have never been of a benevolent nature. If Li Qiuying fell into my hands, I would have personally butchered her." I lowered my gaze to his veined hands, a smile that did not reach my eyes. But fortunately, my husband hails from a prestigious family and would never stoop to such base acts. One cannot deny that my mother-in-law played a ruthless card. The Shen family status was such that Li Qiuying's reputation was irreparably tarnished, and she would never again set foot into the Shen household. However, Li Qiuying was audacious enough to leap into the lake in the dead of winter. I sat in a tea house, sipping warm tea from the stove, quietly watching as Shen Rongqing plunged into the icy waters to save her. He had slipped out of the estate to meet her, without even a servant in tow. Xiao Hong trembled as she poured the tea. "Miss, won't the master drown in the lake?" I set down my teacup, observing the two struggling in the water, and coldly declared, "My child perished because of them. They must pay the price." Xiao Hong softly replied, "But the medicine you took contained nothing harmful, so the master refuses to believe you." "What a cunning strategy," I scoffed. "Li Qiuying deserves to die, and that promiscuous cat should perish as well." "Xiao Hong, do you think that after today, I shall become the wealthiest widow in the capital?" Alas, fate did not align with my desires. Shen Rongqing was an adept swimmer and ultimately managed to push Li Qiuying to the shore. Bystanders pulled him from the water. I looked up at the heavens, and only when tears overflowed from my eyes did I rush to Shen Rongqing's side, weeping, "Husband, you must not die." As he struggled in the water, Shen Rongqing caught sight of me watching from the tea house. Weakly, he opened his eyes, his cold hand caressing my face. "You'd best hope I die. If I live, You shall not survive. However, contrary to my expectations, Shen Rongqing survived, and I did not perish. Due to this incident of drowning while saving her, Shen Rongqing was rendered incapable of siring offspring. I threatened him, stating that should he dare harm me or those around me in any way, I would expose the disgraceful incident that occurred while he was rescuing Li Qiuying to the world. The reputation of the Shen family was worth more to him than his own life, and he had no choice but to back down. From that day forth, Shen Rongqing publicly played the role of a loving husband, becoming the envy of all in the capital. Yet no one knew that all his actions were merely to humiliate me. When my mother-in-law learned that I could no longer bear children, and yet forbade Shen Rongqing from taking a concubine, she loathed me for severing the bloodline of the Shen family, punishing me each night by making me kneel before the ancestral hall in repentance. To avoid damaging the bond between mother and son, she placed the blame for Li Qiuying's suicide entirely upon me. After Li Qiuying jumped into the lake, she failed to receive timely medical attention, succumbing to a cold illness within 2 months. Shen Rongqing's hatred for me deepened as he ruthlessly grasped my throat. You vile woman! It was you who caused her death. I forced a strained smile. I merely chose not to save her. How does that equate to killing her? Given what she did, it was merciful that I didn't stab her twice. Why don't you choke me to death today, to avenge her? Shen Rongqing's grip tightened and then loosened. It wasn't that he was unwilling to kill me. He simply did not dare risk the reputation of the Shen family for such a matter. Thus, we continued to torment one another, enduring 20 years of absurdity. In this new life, I shall no longer live such a wretched existence. I have missed every opportunity to meet with Shen Rongqing. Now, I find myself confined to the courtyard by my father, unable to see anyone at all. Little Hong has grown anxious. Miss, you have reached the age of marriage. If the master confines you for too long, it may arouse suspicions among outsiders, which would be detrimental to your reputation. My hand hesitated as I held the brush. Regrettably, my father is not as ruthless as I am, and dares not completely ruin my reputation. My father, akin to Shen Rongqing from my previous life, wishes to harm me but cannot bring himself to do so. Lil Hong sighed. I wonder how much longer you will be confined. I rubbed my wrist and replied nonchalantly, it won't be long. My grandmother is unaware of the reasons behind my confinement, yet, to assert her authority as the matriarch, she punishes me daily by making me transcribe Buddhist scriptures. In the past, when my mother was unable to bear my father a legitimate son for an extended period, she imposed the same punishment on her. The scriptures must be copied from dusk until dawn, until my eyes grow dim with fatigue. My grandmother claims this is the best way to temper one's character. The only time I can leave the courtyard is when I deliver the scriptures. Inside my grandmother's chamber, my aunt is half kneeling at the bedside, massaging my grandmother's legs. My aunt, of a gentle disposition, is often summoned back by my grandmother for reprimands due to my uncle's high status. As my grandmother did not permit me to rise, I remained kneeling. My grandmother, whose health is poor and seldom ventures out, listened to my aunt discuss matters in the capital. I have heard that Lord Li has supported concubine Fong as his new wife. My grandmother, with her eyes closed, replied, with so many affairs in the inner courtyard, a woman must manage them. I too was married as a concubine 2 months after my husband's first wife passed away, my aunt continued, taking the medicine bowl from a servant and handing it to my grandmother. The late Lady Li was beautiful, and her children were all striking. The young master of the Li family and his sister are like 2 peas in a pod. At her words, the bowl slipped from my grandmother's hand, shattering on the floor. She rubbed her temples and waved us away. You may both leave. I wish to be alone for a while. My aunt and I exchanged a glance before stepping outside. Once we reached a secluded spot, my aunt spoke to me. Years ago, in order to pave the way for my brother, my mother forced me to marry a man nearly 50 years old when I had just come of age as a girl. I have endured endless humiliation over the years, living a life worse than death, and she has never cared. I am her own flesh and blood, yet as a woman, she has never regarded me as a person. All these years, she has taken in many concubines for my brother, none of whom could bear a son for the Song family. My aunt's eyes were filled with unrestrained resentment as she scoffed. Who would have thought that the grandson she longed for would bear another surname? Truly, this is poetic justice. I lowered my gaze and said, Aunt, do not return to that shop in the west of the city. Very well. Today has at least allowed me to vent some of my anger. My aunt replied with a sardonic smile. When I was married, the Song residents prepared several boxes of worthless trinkets for me. If it weren't for the box of dowry your mother contributed, I fear my life would have been even more miserable. My aunt had placed some herbs in my grandmother's medicinal soup, causing her health to decline further. However, in my previous life, this matter soon came to light. How could she possibly stand against the cunning old fox who had schemed for most of her life? After my grandmother ruined her appearance, she sent several dancing girls to her husband's family. My aunt was trampled upon in the back courtyard until she lost her life. Just before leaving, my aunt suddenly asked me, "Why do you trust me so much?" I turned to look at her and replied, "Shared interests cannot bring people together, but shared hatred can." My aunt despises my grandmother for ruining her life. I, too, harbor hatred for my grandmother's greed for my mother's dowry, which disrupted my mother's childhood love, leading her to marry into the Song family and ruin her life. My aunt's lips curled into a slight smile. "You are even smarter than I thought. They are no match for you." Before my mother passed away, the barefoot doctor my grandmother summoned claimed that my mother was carrying another girl. My grandmother, deeming it a waste of silver, secretly replaced some precious herbs in my mother's medicine. It was only after my mother died in childbirth and she saw my brother's lifeless body, bruised, that she sighed to the wet nurse beside her. If only I hadn't replaced those herbs, would my grandson have survived? Over the years, my grandmother arranged several concubines for my father, only to add a few daughters to the family. She never anticipated that the grandson she had longed for would not bear the Song surname. At a banquet, she finally met the grandson she had yearned for. A bright and clever child. Though only 3 years old, he could read and recite poetry. The usually stingy grandmother surprisingly gifted him a longevity lock made of pure gold. She desired to bring her grandson back to the Song residence for upbringing, but as a high-ranking matriarch, she dared not act foolishly. She could only keep this secret, which became a source of anxiety for her. 3 days after returning from the Lee residence, she had already refused food and water. This time, no one discovered that she had been poisoned. They merely thought she had lost her appetite, causing her health to deteriorate. After my grandmother collapsed, all the invitations sent to the residence bore my name. Though my father fears me, he cannot keep me confined forever. On the way to the Seong residence, I had the carriage stop and chose a pair of white jade earrings. My father looked at me with a cold sneer. "What precious item has the Grand Princess not seen? Why would she take notice of your earrings?" I held the box and smiled faintly. One cannot go empty-handed. My father scoffed. "Do as you wish, but do not disgrace the Song family." With that, he turned and left. My father and I have become estranged. He no longer wishes to even share a carriage with me. I waited at the gate of the Seong residence for quite some time, only entering when I saw Imperial concubine Xiao disembark from her carriage. I did not go to the front courtyard but pretended to have sprained my ankle, sitting on a stone by a small path. As I rubbed my ankle, I quickly stood and bowed when I saw the Grand Princess. She raised her hand slightly and instructed her maid, "Help her to the side room to rest." I gazed at the East Pearl earrings dangling from her earlobe and hesitated before speaking. "Your Highness possesses an innate noble grace. Adorning yourself with such extravagant items seems somewhat excessive." The maid behind her instantly changed her expression. "Impudent! How dare you speak so of the princess?" I lowered my eyes and spoke fearlessly. My maternal grandfather once engaged in the jewelry trade, and in my youth, I heard him say that East pearls placed under sunlight reveal a rainbow sheen. The Grand Princess took a glance at the East Pearl from her right ear and, sensing something amiss, turned to her maid and commanded, "Fetch another pair of earrings from the room." Not far away, several noble young ladies were approaching. Returning to fetch the earrings would likely be too late. I hurriedly presented the pair of white jade earrings I had purchased on the way. "This is what I bought while shopping. It's merely a common style." For months, the treasury had not given me any spending money, and my purse was quite empty. The white jade on those earrings was hardly valuable, lacking transparency and even bearing several flaws. The Grand Princess, however, smiled and said, "I find this quite delightful." When the Grand Princess appeared at the banquet, Imperial concubine Xiao had just been discussing with the guests how to identify East pearls. The simplest method was to place the East pearl in sunlight. If it revealed a rainbow sheen, it was genuine, while a grayish hue indicated a fake. This year, large East pearls were scarce, barely enough to make a pair of earrings, currently adorning the ears of the favored Imperial concubine Xiao. She looked at the Grand Princess with pride, but was taken aback to see her wearing a pair of simple white jade earrings, and she mockingly scolded. How can the princess wear such inferior items without fearing the disgrace to the royal family? With the constant floods in Lingnan, I have had my thoughts occupied with alleviating my father's worries, and I haven't focused on such matters. The Grand Princess lowered her gaze with a smile and remarked, It is indeed the esteemed concubine who, adorned with the priceless Eastern pearl, has come to the banquet at the manor, truly placing this princess in her thoughts. Everyone was aware that recently, the Grand Princess and the Prime Minister had generously donated a considerable sum to establish porridge stalls in the disaster-stricken areas. Upon hearing this, the overly ornate concubine Xiao felt her pride wounded. The maidservant who had come to escort me from the side chamber chuckled as she recounted the furious expression on concubine Zhao's face at that moment. Concubine Xiao had secretly swapped the birthday gift the emperor had previously bestowed upon the Grand Princess. In my past life, those counterfeit Eastern pearl earrings had caused the Grand Princess great embarrassment. This time around, I had successfully won her favor. After my ankle was treated, I was led to the banquet table by the maidservant. My father, now aging and with failing eyesight, occasionally glanced at the Grand Princess seated at the head of the table. He likely believed that his old eyes were deceiving him, as he thought the earrings she wore were the ones I had gifted her. When he saw me seated beside the Grand Princess, engaging in light-hearted conversation with her, he was utterly astonished. As we left the Prime Minister's residence, my father scoffed, "You are quite clever, managing to win the Grand Princess's favor." At that moment, a stewardess approached, holding a box. "Master Song speaks wisely. Today, our Grand Princess has indeed praised your daughter for her cleverness." The stewardess opened the box to reveal a pair of golden keys and a gilded cosmetic case. My father, upon seeing the contents of the box, nearly fainted from indignation. A mere pair of inferior white jade earrings had exposed my embarrassment to the Grand Princess. Her intentions were unmistakable. The golden keys and gilded cosmetic case were gifts meant for the head matriarch. With my grandmother gravely ill, I, as the only legitimate daughter, was now the sole one qualified to oversee the household. My father performed some superficial tasks to appear as if he were managing affairs, merely overseeing the purchasing and bookkeeping of essential supplies. My life was not particularly easy, yet it was not excessively burdensome either. Seasons changed swiftly and time flew by. Recently, my father sought to hastily marry me off to an impoverished scholar who had not yet entered government service. When I casually mentioned that the Grand Princess would personally oversee my marriage, he ceased to bring up the matter. The downfall of the Li family occurred somewhat later than in my previous life. In that life, Li Shang was implicated in embezzling disaster relief funds, whereas in this life, he was dismissed from his position after accidentally killing a singer in a brothel. I recalled that, in my previous life, it was another confidant of Prince Hung who had caused the singer's death. It was well known that Prince Hung was lecherous and extravagant, leading me to believe that Li Shang was merely taking the blame for him. I could not comprehend why such a twist of fate had occurred in this life, until I visited a fabric shop to select materials for winter clothing and overheard a conversation among nearby women, discussing how the beloved young master of the Shin family had been punished to kneel in the ancestral hall for 3 days. I wonder what kind of potion the young master of the Taifus family has been given. They say he has not eaten or drunk anything for 3 days. His mother is the Princess of Yongning. How could she bear to watch her son ruin his future by allowing the daughter of a convicted official into their home? Yet, a mother's heart aches for her son. I have heard that the princess has already agreed to let that seductress enter as a concubine. Upon hearing the familiar name, I paused in my actions. To ruin one's future for the sake of marrying the daughter of a convicted official? It seemed that Shen Rongjing had also been reincarnated. In my past life, Li Qiuying's death had been his greatest regret. Therefore, in this life, he would stop at nothing to marry Li Qiuying. I could not help but wonder if, this time, with Li Qiuying in the hands of the Princess of Yongning, Shen Rongjing would still be able to protect her. As I sat in the tea house, savoring snacks, I found myself chuckling at the thought. Suddenly, Li Qiuying, veiled, appeared before me, her autumn-like eyes glaring. "Song Jinyu, why are you still competing with me at this time? Are you truly trying to drive me to my death?" I was perplexed. "What am I competing with you for?" She bit her lip and said, "You ruin my reputation. Don't you wish to take away Shin Gongzi from me? In all honesty, I would seize anything, but Shen Rongjing was someone I would willingly yield to another." "Ruin your reputation?" I suddenly grasped the implication of her words and retorted, "Are you referring to the incident at the academy, where you copied my painting and pieced together poems from several other young ladies to attain the title of the capital's foremost talented woman? In my past life, out of a sense of sentiment, I had refrained from exposing her, knowing how vital Face was to an unmarried girl. However, in this life, I had no obligation to preserve her dignity. Days prior, at the poetry gathering hosted by the Minister of Justice's wife, I had unveiled the painting I created during my youth. The yellowed scroll bore several poems. It soon became apparent to many that the painting and the phrases within were strikingly similar to those composed by Li Qiuying at a different poetry gathering. At that time, her claim of youthful creation had left others unable to debate further. She likely had not anticipated that I possessed the authentic youthful creation. The so-called foremost talented woman of the capital was nothing more than a farce. Through the veil, I could see Li Qiuying's complexion shift from red to pale. I gazed at her and softly stated, "I previously warned you that if you appeared before me again, I would expose your secret." Her eyes were bloodshot as she glared at me. "Then I shall reveal your crime of murder to the world. Since the Li family is in trouble, I may as well drag you down with me." Truly, she had made progress, learning to threaten others. I chuckled and raised my voice. "Miss Li, why must you plagiarize others' poetry? You are a talented woman. This is unbecoming." Many patrons in the tea house turned their gazes toward us. Li Qiuying fled in a panic. She stumbled down the stairs and collided with a donkey cart. I could not help but laugh at the scene. As I sat in the carriage returning to the manor, my laughter had yet to cease. Xiao Hong could not contain herself and remarked, "Miss, did you not say you wanted to be a heartless and ruthless woman?" "A heartless and ruthless woman would not laugh in such a manner." "Indeed, I would not, unless unable to restrain myself." However, upon returning to the manor, my laughter faded. For the Shun family had sent someone. In this life, I had not escaped my fate. They were eager to find a suitable young woman to marry Shin Rongjing and had somehow heard of me. Nevertheless, my father declined the proposal, citing my need to care for my ailing grandmother and manage the household. He warned me sternly, "With your domineering nature, marrying into the Taifu's residence will only stir up trouble and implicate our family." His ulterior motives were transparent. He simply wished for Li Qiuying to wed Shin Rongjing. I had no desire to involve myself in this matter and turned to walk into the courtyard. However, I underestimated my father's cunning. In the evening, when a maidservant from the kitchen brought in a calming soup, her demeanor seemed off. It was only when I finished the soup and set down the bowl that she ceased her prying gaze. Not long after, a sweaty man lifted my blanket, only to discover it was filled with pillows. The moment he turned, I struck him with a vase, rendering him unconscious. Xiao Hong, hearing the commotion, entered my chamber with a candlestick, only to find a bloodied man sprawled on the floor, causing her to scream in shock. Soon, a group of men carrying torches arrived in my courtyard. Upon seeing my father, I feigned fright and cried, "Father." Thankfully, I managed to knock the thief unconscious. Otherwise, my reputation would have been tarnished. My father's expression was grim. "As long as you are unharmed. Thank you for your concern, father. I am well, and merely need another bowl of calming soup to sleep." My father's expression froze momentarily. I lowered my voice to a whisper, audible only to him, saying, "Father, you entrusted me with the kitchen's purchasing and accounting. Many in the kitchen rely on me for their livelihoods. How foolish of you to allow someone to tamper with my food." The courtyard echoed with the voice of a servant announcing the arrival of guests. "Master, the madam fell asleep after drinking the soothing soup tonight, but she suddenly began to foam at the mouth in her sleep. The people in the courtyard have already gone to summon the doctor." Upon hearing this, my father's countenance changed drastically, and he hurried to my grandmother's quarters. The lights burned brightly throughout the night, ultimately saving my grandmother's life. As my father regained his composure and stepped into the front courtyard, he was met with the sight of two lifeless bodies lying in the yard. He stood stunned for a moment, horrified, before retreating to the wall, clutching it as he began to retch. The servants swiftly covered the corpses with white cloths. I offered my father a respectful bow. "Last night, I found a medicine bottle in Xiaoer's room. This girl harbored intentions to harm the matriarch. After being interrogated last night, she absurdly claimed she was acting on your orders."
Father.
"It is utterly preposterous. You have always been filial. How could you harm grandmother? Therefore I had her and that rogue killed, and we shall declare it as having caught them in an illicit affair. Father, is my handling of this matter acceptable?" My father's face turned a ghastly shade, and after a lengthy pause, he managed to utter a single phrase. "Well done, you have some skill." A servant announced that the Princess Dowager's carriage awaited at the gate. Naturally, I possessed some capabilities. Otherwise, the Princess Dowager would not have hastened to see me upon returning from accompanying the Prime Minister south. I observed my father's pale visage and remarked with a smile, "The Princess Dowager even stated she would personally select a suitor for me. Not only the Grand Tutor's family, but it seems marrying into the royal family would not pose a challenge for me now." These words were merely a ruse to intimidate my father. The Princess Dowager was eager to see me because, in her idle moments, she had listened to my tales of fictional stories. I had woven my experiences from both lives into those narratives, and she was enraptured. Having just returned from accompanying the Prime Minister south, she sent someone to bring me to her. Perhaps it was the entanglement of 2 lifetimes. If I do not marry Shin Rongjing in this life, my father would certainly arrange a wretched match for me, ruining my existence. Women, constrained by propriety, often find themselves devoid of autonomy, rather than being chosen by others. It is far better to take the initiative oneself. It is quite a coincidence that the Princess Dowager suddenly inquired about my marital prospects. I heard that the Princess of Yongning has taken a liking to you and wishes to have you enter her household as her daughter-in-law. I have no desire to leap into that fiery pit. The Shin family is esteemed, and Shin Rongjing is indeed a handsome gentleman. If you're concerned about that, Miss Li, Yongning has some means. She would not gain entrance. Your Highness, do you recall the tale I told in my narrative about Meng's cousin, who bore a daughter after an illicit affair before remarrying? If you have met that Miss Li, you might notice the striking resemblance between her and me. For a moment, the Princess Dowager was left speechless in shock. Is this truly the case?
Indeed.
Such outrageous events are not something I would dare to fabricate. Then your father has been scheming against you all along? I lowered my gaze and whispered. My father would go to any lengths for his illegitimate daughter. He even drugged my soup last night, seeking to tarnish my purity with an outsider. Had the maid not mistakenly served the wrong soup in her panic, I would not be here today. You speak truthfully. How could you have endured such humiliation? Even if I were to voice this, none would believe me. Your Highness, consider it merely a tale. The matron standing behind spoke up. Miss Song's words ring true. When I went to fetch her today, I overheard the guards discussing the grave incident at the Song residence last night, where the matriarch fell ill, and a maid and her accomplice were killed. I trembled uncontrollably. The Princess Dowager's gaze turned to one of sympathy. Is there anything you wish for me to assist you with? I shook my head. I only hope to marry soon, even if it is to an ordinary family. The Princess Dowager interrupted. Even an ordinary family cannot protect you. If you desire, you can marry any of my younger brothers. I concealed the joy in my eyes and spoke hesitantly. What about the third prince? The Princess Dowager's expression shifted in surprise. You mean the third brother? Everyone knows that the third prince, Xia Wuja, is the son of a dancing girl. Though he is of royal blood, he has no substantial background. Fortunately, he has earned his reputation through years of military service. What I desire from him is not his status, but the knowledge that he will soon meet his demise in battle. I cannot forsake the worldly ties to become a nun, to escape the Song family. I must ultimately marry. If so, it would be better to embrace widowhood early. If Xia Wuja marries me, after his death, I can still manage the household and affairs for him, so he would not be at a loss. With an unflinching demeanor, I declared, since our last meeting, I have harbored a deep affection for the third prince. The Princess Dowager contemplated before asking, Are you referring to the time during the spring hunt when you passed by the military camp and witnessed him executing a deserter? Upon reflection, it seems I have only encountered Xia Wuja once in this lifetime. I could only nod in affirmation. The Princess Dowager regarded me with a nuanced expression. Many noble ladies were frightened out of their wits that day. I thought my third brother would never marry. Indeed, that was the case in my previous life. With the Princess Dowager's support, my union with Xia Wuja was effectively secured. My father mocked my recklessness. What kind of person is Xia Wuja? The emperor has cast him to the borders, merely wishing for him to fend for himself. Do you truly believe you have found a protector? He has always been bloodthirsty, even daring to kill the wet nurse who raised him. Just wait and see how long your clever schemes will keep you alive in his presence. Whether I perish by his hand is uncertain, but I am certain I will die after you, father. I retrieved a dowry list from the table and handed it to my father. I have copied the dowry list from my mother's marriage into the Song family. Please prepare a similar one for me. My father flipped through the thick tome, his hands trembling. Where will the Song family find the funds to provide you with these? Are you trying to drive me to my doom? If we factor in the dowry you prepared for Li Qiuying and the properties and lands accumulated over these years, we might be able to gather 80%. I smiled faintly. Father, my future husband has a tempestuous temperament. If he discovers you have allocated such a substantial dowry for an illegitimate daughter, who knows what he might do? In the end, my father, unable to forsake the illegitimate daughter he had sired, relented. 50%. 50%, nearly draining the entire Song estate. I nodded in satisfaction. Living a second life. Many things have changed. Yet Li Qiuying remains as in my previous life, surrounded by several maids who scold her for being unruly. As the daughter of a traitor still dares to aspire for a place as a concubine. However, this time, her courtyard is under significantly tighter surveillance. This matter was quickly suppressed, and before long, the day of the autumn banquet at the minister's residence arrived. Calculating the time, Xia Wuzhe should be returning to the capital soon. Once he returns and we are wed, he can return to the battlefield, and I shall embrace widowhood. With Shen Rongjing's protection, Li Qiuying did not suffer the same humiliation as in my previous life. However, I did not anticipate her appearance at such a gathering. On a narrow path, she appeared before me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Song Jinyu, you have conspired to poison my mother. Now you leave me no means to survive? What means of survival? You have ruined my reputation, and not a single part of the dowry my uncle prepared for me remains. Are you intent on driving me to my end? If I wished to ruin her, I would not resort to such trivial methods. I glanced toward the familiar figure behind the tree and finally understood her motives for staging this drama. I raised my hand and struck her across the face. Li Qiuying, in disbelief, covered her face as she stared at me. I smiled at her. Did you not wish to play the victim before the men? Allow me to assist you. She dared not provoke me, glaring fiercely in return. Song Jinyu, not only have you slain my mother, but you have also poisoned my grandmother, driving your own father to illness. Your malevolence knows no bounds, and retribution will surely find you. But this was not right. Shen Rongjing had already departed. Who was she addressing with her words? At that moment, a man clad in purple approached from behind me. His features were strikingly refined, yet an undeniable air of menace surrounded him. Meeting my gaze, he raised an eyebrow with a hint of amusement. Miss Song, were you not so infatuated with me? Why do you act as if we are strangers? It turned out to be Xia Wuzhe. I regained my composure and curtsied. Li Qiuying, with half her face swollen, howled in anguish. If even a single word of what I just said is false, may I suffer a wretched fate. Does the third prince truly wish to marry such a vile woman? It became clear that having accepted her dowry, she intended to ruin my betrothal. A cold sweat broke out as I considered the implications. If this match were to be disrupted, where would I find another ill-fated husband? Upon hearing her words, Xia Wuzhe cast a deep look in my direction. I had anticipated that my betrothed would be a dull noblewoman, yet I did not expect her to be so intriguing. I was momentarily taken aback, then unfastened the fragrant pouch from my waist and hung it at Xia Wuzhe's side. Li Qiuying stared at the scene before her in disbelief. I glanced at her and remarked coolly, "It is fortunate you did not ruin my good fortune today. Otherwise, you would have lost your life." Xia Wuzhe chuckled. Miss Song, you are truly kind-hearted, sparing her life. It was not kindness that motivated me. I found it far more entertaining to observe her and the princess of Yongning tear each other apart. That day, Li Qiuying was so frightened that she clung tightly to Shen Rongjing's side. The daughter of the minister, who had just been betrothed, cried in fury. After the banquet, the minister dispatched a servant to convey to Shen Rongjing that should he insist on marrying Li Qiuying, the betrothal would be annulled. Upon hearing this, Shen Rongjing appeared somewhat distracted, fixating instead on the fragrant pouch at Xia Wuzhe's waist. I did not expect that while returning to the estate through a narrow alley, Shen Rongjing would block my path. He could hardly muster the energy for pleasantries, his tone laced with derision. You have chosen Xia Wuzhe for your life. What a curious taste you possess. Your taste has not changed. You remain infatuated with Li Qiuying, I retorted. Shen Rongjing did not bristle at my retort, but merely smiled. I hear that your days at the Song residence are rather unpleasant. Shall I lend you a hand and propose to marry you? For a fleeting moment, I thought I had misheard him. It reminded me of the time after my death in my past life, when my soul hovered above, watching Shen Rongjing lean against my coffin, believing he would be unable to sleep from joy. Instead, he sat there with red-rimmed eyes, murmuring, in the next life, be a good person, and do not be so cruel. He had never been one to believe in ghosts or deities, yet had hired a priest to pray for me for 3 days and nights. Those who came to pay their respects truly thought we had loved each other for a lifetime. I scoffed and asked, in this life, I am far more malicious than in my previous one. You still wish to marry me? Aren't you afraid your heart might be toyed with? Shen Rongjing's gaze darkened, and he fell silent. It must be the minister's strong wine that has intoxicated you, I said with a smirk. You still love to play the part. But I am already betrothed and have no desire to indulge you. Shen Rongjing looked at me in silence, his voice barely above a whisper. Jinyu, is there truly no possibility for us? Not exactly. You know well I simply wish to be a widow, I replied, observing the fading light in his eyes. Should you pass away, I might consider marrying you. As I turned to leave, I heard him mockingly mutter, so in this life, you still wish for my demise. What else could it be? At the entrance of the Song residence, Xiao Hong stood beside the carriage, persistently signaling to me. I could not fathom her intent and frowned, saying, why can't you just speak plainly? Xiao Hong pointed behind me, biting her lip. The third prince is here. I turned to see Xia Wuja standing behind me, his gaze fixed on me. I heard from my subordinates that someone named Shen has been following your carriage, so I came to see. My expression turned to one of shock as I asked, did you hear anything?
No.
I was about to breathe a sigh of relief when I heard him coldly remark, I only heard you express your desire to be a widow, wishing to marry someone who will die young. As someone who has fought on the battlefield for years, with life and death uncertain, is this truly how you see me? My heart sank, and by the time I returned to the estate, I could hardly stand, leaning on Xiao Hong's shoulder, quietly weeping. Xiao Hong, perhaps I should find a nunnery to stay for a couple of years before returning. Xiao Hong patted my head gently, soothingly saying, I will accompany you, Mississippi. My father, who had been ill, managed to sip a few spoonfuls of soup upon hearing that I had angered Xia Wuja. Yet, when the betrothal gifts arrived the next day, his expression was ominously dark. Even I had not anticipated that Xia Wuja would still be willing to marry me. The day after our wedding, he was to depart for the frontier. He left without waking me, and it was not until the sun was high that I finally awoke. Gazing at the empty side of the bed, I recalled how I had clutched his arm the night before, breathlessly wanting to say something, but found myself unable to speak. His deployment to the frontier was the emperor's decree. He was already a prince loathed by the emperor, and should he defy the order, the emperor would undoubtedly seize the opportunity to eliminate him. Even if I revealed the outcome to him, it would not change anything. In the end, all I could say was, do not die. I am not yet ready to be a widow. Before Xia Wuja departed, he placed the key to the storeroom on my vanity. All the rewards he had earned over the years were stored there. My long-frozen heart inevitably began to thaw. However, just as I stood, my weak legs nearly caused me to collapse. I silently cursed Xia Wuja for being such a reckless man. Perhaps it was indeed better to be a widow sooner rather than later. After 2 months of quiet, Li Qiuying finally ventured out. However, she was accosted on the bustling street by a fierce woman. That woman berated her for being involved with her husband, publicly restraining her and delivering several hard slaps. Before she could be pulled away, Li Qiuying removed a copper hairpin from her head and slashed it across her own face. The pin had been poisoned, leaving a long scar on her face that no remedy could heal. Despite this, Shen Rongjing still intended to take her as a concubine, infuriating the princess of Yongning to the point of illness. Perhaps it was the disfigurement that drove her, or perhaps she could not bear the thought of becoming a concubine. She jumped into the lake once more. This time, Shen Rongjing did not lose his senses as he had in my past life, jumping into the water to save her, but instead instructed a nearby servant to retrieve her. Soaked and trembling, she looked at Shen Rongjing and lamented, if you abandon me, I will not be able to live. Her pitiful demeanor moved those around her, yet they failed to see the icy detachment in Shen Rongjing's eyes, devoid of any compassion. At this moment, Shen Rongjing was no longer the naive youth he once was. In his previous life, he had risen to power, standing beneath the emperor above all others. Throughout his journey, he had encountered countless schemes. This time, he recognized that Li Qiuying was employing a desperate ploy to elicit his sympathy. She had only jumped into the lake upon seeing him. Such a clumsy tactic had deceived him for a lifetime in his past life. The obsession of unrequited love from his youth was suddenly cast aside. That night, the princess of Yongning fell ill, without warning. Li Qiuying clung to Shen Rongjing, weeping bitterly. How could the county princess fall ill? She is deliberately forcing you to return. If you leave, those who wish me harm will come back. Shen Rongjing had heard such words before. In my previous life, after I had taken a miscarriage medication and became unwell, when the servants urged him to return, Li Qiuying had uttered similar sentiments. At that time, Shen Rongjing believed it was my trick to lure him back. After all, the medicine I had taken showed no signs of harm. Even if there were issues, they could only be attributed to my own machinations. I have repeatedly told Shen Rongjing that I would never stake my own child as a wager. He never believed me. But when everything unfolded before his very eyes once more, he finally came to trust the words I spoke back then. He did not linger in Li Qiuying's courtyard but hastened back to the Shen residence instead. Within the estate, All were gathered in the princess's chambers, oblivious to the suspicious figure of a firewood maid. Shen Rongjing instructed his subordinates to seize the maid attempting to escape through the kitchen's dog hole. Under interrogation, she revealed herself to be a former servant of the Li family. She had poisoned the princess's calming soup and, before returning to the kitchen, had replaced the poisoned bowl with another. Thus, when the physician meticulously examined the princess's food, he failed to discern the nature of the poison she had ingested. 2 months later, Li Qiuying perished in a humble courtyard in the western part of the city. When she died, her entire face was grotesquely decayed. Upon hearing of this, I was somewhat taken aback. The poison that had afflicted Li Qiuying was likely Huan Yan San. Though its toxicity was severe, it could be mitigated with an antidote, albeit one that was exceedingly precious. However, a month prior, Li Qiuying's courtyard had been raided and her possessions were looted. After that day, Shen Rongjing never returned. Upon learning that Li Qiuying had threatened to take her own life, he sent someone to the Shen residence multiple times, but Shen Rongjing was nowhere to be found. The Princess Dowager, upon hearing the news, was filled with alarm. I once thought this gentleman from the Shen family to be a devoted lover. How has he suddenly changed? A nearby woman interjected, "Men are ever so fickle." Yet, with Li's demise, this young master from the Shen family has managed to retreat from the brink. And he has now been recommended for an official position by the Shen family. Many suitors are now approaching the Shen family. I hear that the Minister of Rights regrets having withdrawn his proposal. The Princess Dowager scoffed coldly. This world is indeed laughable. A woman in such a predicament has her reputation irrevocably tarnished, while a man can simply start anew. The moment those words left her lips, the surrounding clamor fell silent. The Princess Dowager rubbed her temples, and the women retreated from the pavilion. I tossed bait into the pond, watching the vibrant koi frolic, before turning back to the princess with a smile. "Your Highness speaks the truth. I often ponder, if the virtue of chastity is so esteemed, why do men not cherish it?" The Princess Dowager regarded me and smiled in return. Shen Rongjing, after all, had been reborn and found great success in the officialdom. He aligned himself with Prince Hung, steadily ascending the ranks and entering the central court. In his past life, Prince Hung had supported the son of the favored consort Xiao, the sixth prince, to ascend as heir apparent. Following the emperor's death, Prince Hung was elevated to regent, wielding immense power. He had executed a move that was guaranteed not to fail. Soon, a letter accusing him of colluding with foreign enemies aroused the emperor's suspicion, leading to his imprisonment. The emperor forbade the Princess Dowager from entering the palace to plead on his behalf. The Princess Dowager could only entrust me with delivering the minister's garments to the palace. Inside, I encountered Shen Rongjing. I cast a cold gaze upon him. "You, minister, have led a life of integrity. Who would have thought you would be so wronged? In any case, he will ultimately perish under the emperor's suspicion, so it is better to make use of him." He observed me intently. "Once I possess power, all that I desire will be within my grasp. What more could you possibly want, having wielded such power in 2 lifetimes? "You," he replied, fixing his gaze upon me. "Jean Yu. In this life, I still wish to take you as my wife." I coolly reminded him, "Shen Rongjing, I am already married. We both know he will not return from the battlefield." He smirked. "Once the minister falls, the Princess Dowager will also lose her influence. Who will protect you then?" In his eyes, I saw an unyielding resolve. Yet he should also understand that, even in the face of death, I would not yield. I never imagined that after battling him for 20 years in my previous life, I would have to continue this struggle in this one. After leaving the palace, Shen Rongjing followed closely behind me. I possessed too much knowledge. He could not allow me to jeopardize his plans. The Princess Dowager awaited me at the palace gates, approaching me with concern as I emerged. "Is he well? Has he suffered any punishment?" I squeezed her hand, shaking my head. "The minister is unharmed. Your Highness must take care of yourself, for the minister relies entirely on you now." The Princess Dowager, glancing at Shen Rongjing standing behind me, scoffed coldly. I never expected he would aid Prince Hung. Now that the minister has lost power, Prince Hung has allied with consort Xiao, and I am no longer able to contend. I gently wiped away the tears on the side of the Princess Dowager's face with my handkerchief, speaking softly so that only we could hear, "Your Highness." What I hadn't anticipated was that Prince Hung would support the sixth prince's ascension to the throne. It reminds me of my father. The Princess Dowager stared at me in stunned silence. Soon, the palace guards separated us. Shen Rongjing's men stood guard outside my residence, effectively placing me under house arrest. 7 days later, at the royal hunting grounds, The crown prince's horse was startled, trampling a young eunuch who was leading it. Prince Hung, risking his life, saved the crown prince. This scene unfolded before the emperor's eyes. After that day, consort Xiao fell from favor, and the crown prince was confined to the eastern palace. The emperor's health deteriorated day by day, and the princess dowager frequently accompanied him. That evening, poison was introduced into the emperor's medicine. Prince Hung, leading a rebel army, stormed the great hall. The palace was engulfed in flames, casting a crimson hue over the night. Shun Rongjing, accompanied by his guards, burst into my residence, his deep, affectionate gaze fixed upon me. Jin Yu, after this night, Prince Hung will eliminate all political adversaries. You must come with me if you wish to survive. My expression remained indifferent. For the sake of his sole son, Prince Hung is willing to go to such lengths, even resorting to a coup. Shun Rongjing's expression faltered. How did you know? I guessed, I replied with a slight smile. I never expected my conjectures would indeed assist the Princess Dowager in toppling Prince Hung and consort Xiao. Prince Hung has already led his troops into the Great Hall. The Princess Dowager cannot win. I touched the dagger concealed in my sleeve, softly asking, Do you think we could start anew after death? He trembled as he spoke. Do not do anything foolish. I cannot bear to lose you again. What foolishness! The dagger in my sleeve was intended for his life. At the moment I drew the dagger, ready to strike, an arrow suddenly pierced through his chest. Shun Rongjing collapsed before me, blood pouring from his mouth and nose. He gazed at the dagger in my hand, his eyes flickering. I smiled at him. What is this? You seem rather surprised that I would kill you? Not far away stood a soldier clad in armor, bow in hand. It was one of Xia Wuji's men. I was taken into the palace. The coup had already subsided. Prince Hung was executed before the Great Hall. With reddened eyes, I rushed to Xia Wuji, trembling all over. Thank goodness my husband sent someone, otherwise, I would have lost my life. He embraced my shoulders, whispering coldly in my ear. I heard from Qining that if he had arrived even a moment later, Shun Rongjing would have died at your hands. Xia Wuji saw through my act immediately, and I grew weary of pretending. I raised my eyes to him and asked, How did you return? The Empress anticipated their rebellion and summoned me back to the capital for support. I had not miscalculated. Ultimately, the Princess Dowager had triumphed. In this lifetime, I had once again bested Shun Rongjing. Before the Emperor's death, he entrusted power to the Princess Dowager. She ascended the throne, becoming the first female emperor in our dynasty's history. Xia Wuji was reinstated and promoted to regent. In the capital, everyone sought to align themselves with the powerful. But no one could match my adeptness at climbing the social hierarchy. The remnants of Prince Hung were swiftly purged. Before Shun Rongjing was executed, I visited him one last time. With reddened eyes and a hoarse voice, he asked, Jin Yu, is there no longer any possibility for us? I suddenly recalled that after my demise, my soul lingered in the ether. As he sat before my coffin throughout the night, his eyes reddened and bloodshot. He murmured incessantly, In the next life, be a good person, cease your wicked ways. I gazed at Shun Rongjing, now a captive, and coldly smirked. You see, in this life, I have not been a good person. I shall only become worse. Indeed, I see it. Manipulating power, controlling hearts. I am ultimately inferior to you. He chuckled softly and inquired, Have you come today to bid me farewell? I shook my head. The letters that led to your downfall in the previous life were not penned by your trusted aides. I reported you a year after my death, not wishing to implicate those around me, nor to encounter you on the road to the underworld. I am here to tell you that in the previous life, I was the victor. The color drained from Shun Rongjing's face in an instant. He had thought there remained a sliver of affection between us, but the bond we once shared had long since dissipated. The palace servant who conveyed my message said he wished to see me before his end, hoping to apologize in person. Yet now that I had arrived, those words of contrition were rendered unutterable. Before departing, I stated, I never intended to forgive you. My vengeance has been entirely exacted, thus your apology is unnecessary. My father was imprisoned next to Shun Rongjing during the rebellion led by the Duke of Hung. He too had played a role. Upon seeing me, he rasped, Save your father. If you plead with the princess and the regent, they will surely spare my life. I halted, fixing my gaze upon his murky eyes, and replied with a light-hearted laugh, They initially intended to spare you. His eyes sparkled with hope, then. I slowly continued, Thus your execution was my design. His Majesty, with the assistance of the Prime Minister, governed the realm. Both he and his consort were adept statesmen, ensuring peace and prosperity. Yet, as in the previous life, They remained childless. They took my son into the palace to raise him, believing his character, influenced by the prime minister, to be far superior to mine, assuring a commendable upbringing. With no responsibilities of child-rearing, I spent my days indulging in merriment alongside Xiaohong. During a game of mahjong, the Princess of Qi, with her veiled insinuations, remarked on my cunning nature, suggesting that to curry favor with His Majesty, I would even send my own son to the palace. I set aside my tiles and, with lowered eyes, replied, I no longer need to employ any schemes. Xiaohong softly sighed, Miss. You truly embody the demeanor of a regent's consort now. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, I lunged at the Princess of Qi, engaging in a scuffle. Everyone present was left dumbfounded. Days later, Xia Wuja returned from the battlefield. I was not left in solitude, dust-covered from battle. He bathed within the room while the Prince of Qi stood outside, lodging a complaint. Third brother, the woman you wed is a veritable shrew. During that altercation, she marred the princess's face. Xia Wuja, seated in the tub, responded to the door. Do not worry, second brother. I shall discipline her. He then turned to me, standing beside the tub, and gently asked, Did you fight? I nodded. Who won? I replied softly, I did. His eyes glimmered with admiration. Well done. The Princess of Qi hails from a family of martial prowess. The prince continued outside. What do you plan to do about her? You must provide me with an explanation today. Naturally, she shall be dealt with according to family rules. Xia Wuja applied the medicinal ointment bestowed by the palace to the faint scar beneath my eye, murmuring, Tomorrow, I shall teach you a few moves. Should you wish to fight again, no one will be able to harm you. His indulgence was becoming increasingly unbearable. You must know that I harbor calculations against everyone. Why then do you treat me with such kindness? Is it wrong to be calculating? How could it be wrong? In my previous life, I contended with my mother-in-law and Shin Rongqing, earning the reputation of a venomous woman in the capital. Xia Wuja's gaze darkened. Everyone who met my biological mother spoke of her innocence and kindness, yet she met a tragic end due to the machinations of those closest to her. Thus, I avenged her by killing that maid. I appreciate that you are calculating to preserve yourself, while also strategizing for me. What could be wrong with that? Had I not encountered you, I might still be an insignificant prince, with many generals disregarding my commands. I would likely have perished on the battlefield by now. In my previous life, Shan Rongqing, with his lofty demeanor, despised my every calculation, having lived 2 lives. It was the first time I heard a man express admiration for a woman of cunning. Xia Wuja truly cherished me, and for the next 20 years, we coexisted harmoniously. I had believed that after living 2 lives, I sought only my own comfort, resolved never to be moved by another. Yet on the day he truly fell in battle, I wept inconsolably. This was the first time I had cried since losing my child in the previous life. For 20 years, he had treated me exceptionally well, and now I was left alone, in a state of utter disarray. Before his passing, Xia Wuja bequeathed to me a cadre of shadow guards he had personally trained, stroking my hair and gently saying, I must protect you. Only then can you live to spend all that silver. Later, when His Majesty fell gravely ill, those who sought to seize power grew restless. His affection for my son attracted peril. It was Xia Wuja's shadow guards who safeguarded our lives. I spared none of those who sought to harm me. Before His Majesty's demise, he summoned me. Several elderly ministers knelt in the hall, proclaiming, We have never encountered such a cruel woman. Your Majesty must not place your trust in her. His Majesty merely held my hand, stating, If she harbored not the slightest ambition, she would have died before marriage. The ministers continued, Should she become Empress Dowager in the future, the reputation of the new emperor will surely suffer. I glanced at the kneeling minister and chuckled, Why not let you shoulder these matters? You are just in time to retire to your hometown, gaining a reputation for loyalty in protecting your sovereign. His Majesty smiled. Before his passing, he entrusted the throne to my son, and I became the Empress Dowager. I lived to the age of 75, surrounded by dutiful children and a multitude of grandchildren. Ascending to a lofty position, I spent my days indulging in music and painting, with no desire to partake in the intrigues of the harem. Everyone claimed I was free from worldly disputes. Little did I expect that in my twilight years, I would earn a reputation for being gentle and virtuous. The tale concludes here. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to our next story.